Hey folks, welcome back to my channel where we learn to be a better programmer. And in this video, I'm going to talk about a topic that's come up on Twitter about whether or not front-end development should exist as its own field outside of the super junior engineer level. But before we get started, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you don't miss out on future videos. Okay, so a tweet popped up by some CEO recently on Twitter where he talked about how the concept of a front-end engineer should not exist outside of those who are super junior in the industry. So what does a super junior mean? Somebody who's brand new to coding, is only familiar with like HTML, CSS, maybe a little bit of JavaScript, and doesn't really have any experience beyond that, may be able to get hired as a junior software engineer, which I'll talk about in a future video, but I don't think there should be a concept of a junior software engineer. I think all of us are engineers and we have different levels of experience, and throwing junior on a job title is just a way for startup companies to kind of pay you less than what you actually deserve. Because I often find that junior developers are a little bit more hungry than those senior developers that are out there. That might be a contentious topic, but I digress. Front-end development is crucial, right? So if you have a website, if you have a mobile app, if you have a game, all of that is front-end software engineering, right? And the concept of having someone who's solely focused on a front end, what the user is seeing, is something that I believe is important. Right, so there's three types of developers generally. So there's front-end developer, full stack developer, and then back-end developer. So front-end is obviously handles like the UI and the user experience and stuff like that. The back-end developer, like myself, we would handle like the business logic on our servers and making sure those servers scale and like they work as they're intended. And then a full stack developer is someone who can do all of it, who can do the front end UI, UX, who can do the back end development and business logic, and so on, right? So the concept that this CEO basically said was like, there should be no concept of a front end software engineer beyond the junior level. And I disagree. I think front end is an extremely difficult discipline within software engineering, right? So I think a front-end developer's job is extremely important, right? So if you're a front-end developer, you have to write in JavaScript, HTML, CSS, or iOS, or Android's UI framework, or whatever it is. And you have to create user experiences and user interfaces that users actually want to use, right? So oftentimes what that looks like at a big company, maybe like Twitter or something, or Facebook or Google, you often have designers that have this vision of how a product should look, and then the front-end developers go off and implement that vision using code and using the tools at their disposal. That's often very hard to do because if you look at some of these designs either on Dribbble.com or Behance or something like that, they're amazingly visually pleasing to look at, right? But actually implementing those in code is actually oftentimes very difficult to do. All those crazy animations that you see, all those crazy UI effects that you see, they're incredibly hard to implement, and also incredibly hard to implement in resource-constrained environments. So like, for example, if you have to implement some crazy animation on a phone or like an Apple Watch or something like that, it's incredibly hard to do and make it work and make the UI and UX extremely like user-friendly, right? And I don't believe that is something that a full stack or even even less so a back-end developer would be able to do and do it well, right? So you can be a full stack engineer and know the front end and know the back end, but you're not going to be able to master both. I don't think anyone can actually do that. I don't think you can be a master, C++, or I don't think you can be a master back-end engineer and know distributed systems and be able to implement like caching solutions and load balancing and all of that stuff and still be able to be a wizard with JavaScript, CSS, and HTML or whatever your front-end development is. I just don't think that's possible. I think you can be average at all of it, but you're never going to be the best at anything, but you're never going to reach your potential in one discipline. So like if you're a back-end software engineer and you focus solely on back-end and you're a back-end engineer for like 10 years, you're going to have 10 years of back-end experience trying to scale things, trying to get things to work at scale and all that kind of stuff. And like, there's no room for you to do front-end work. I think you can do both as a full stack, but you won't do it well. You won't do it like you've done back-end for 10 years or you've done front-end for 10 years. Right? You'll be able to speak both languages, and that's great, but you won't be an expert or in either or. Okay? So ultimately, I think it comes down to this. I think the fact that this CEO basically said that front end isn't really important and that you have to have knowledge of the entire stack, which I think is true. I think as a front-end developer, I think you do need to understand, like, okay, yes, my code will communicate with a back-end, but you don't need to know like the entire tech stack, right? You don't need to know how the back-end is put together, right? But I do think that he was incorrect in his assumption there. I think his mentality is one that comes from startups that often like want to get the most out of every developer that they bring on their team, which makes sense. You don't have a whole lot of cash, you don't have a whole lot of money, so you want to get people that can do everything. You want to get that full stack developer that will get you a product that works, and then when you have money, when you have revenue, when you have all these things, you can hire designers and front-end specific engineers and then back-end specific engineers, right? But I think that tweet was actually extremely unfair to a lot of junior developers and a lot of junior software engineers who are very interested in front-end. And basically this guy comes in and says, there's no future for you if you just want to be a front-end software engineer. And that's not true. I think there's tons of opportunities out there for people who just want to do front end, who just want to do back end, or even who want to be full stack, who want to be jacks of all trades. There's nothing wrong with that. Plenty of companies hire full stack software engineers who need to know the full stack, right? Like, you might even be building an internal tool that talks to a server and you have to implement the UI, right? But it doesn't need to scale, so you can actually do that full stack work. But if you're trying to build a backend that's going to scale to millions and millions of users, you might want to be that backend software engineer. Or if you want to craft a brand new UI on an iPhone, right? Then you might want to get a person or a software engineer who is great at front end, who has been doing iOS software development on the front end for 10 years, right? And that is an example of the concept of a front-end only software engineer, okay? So all you new software engineers out there, I don't want you to get discouraged if you're super interested in front-end and you don't want to do back-end. There's a place for you, and there always will be, in my opinion, in big companies, small companies, startups, what you name it. Now, that comes with a caveat. Like, definitely try to understand how your front-end communicates with a back-end, if there even is a back-end. But don't beat yourself up if you're not if you're not getting how the back-end services work, if you're not understanding how they communicate with databases and return you a response. That's like not important if you want to do front-end only software engineering. Okay, so I hope this video was really helpful to you in your software journeys. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll get to it when I can. And I want to do more videos like these for you guys. Not necessarily just on controversial topics on Twitter, but also just any advice that I can give you from my experience so far as a software engineer and becoming a software engineer. All right, thanks so much. I'll talk to you later. Bye.